You're listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with host Doc Martin. How do you step into your maximum potential? How do you connect your spiritual drive with your physical path? Get ready to meet the maximum you the world needs on Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin now. What if you are exactly where Spirit wanted you to be? Now, we say this often and it sounds like a cliche, but I woke up this morning reflecting on the last few months where I had to dig in and do some things that I hadn't ever done before and hadn't ever planned on doing. And I found that I brought gifts to the table, things that I was capable of, that I had no way of knowing I would have ever had those talents or been able to use them. So let me tell you a story. I never even crossed my mind to be a physician. Never, ever. I never thought of that. I never wanted it. I never dreamt of it. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I wanted to go to Kansas State University to pre-vet school. My dad wouldn't let me. So I stumbled along and ended up in graduate school, followed a man out to California where that fell apart. As I look back, I can see completely why. And then stumbled along to a job, and I worked at Emory University as faculty in the Department of Medicine, and I taught medical students. And I stumbled along in that. I mean, I did well, but it was as if there were pieces set in motion, opportunities that I just kind of stumbled into. And then I was grumbling to one of my colleagues, a man who I respected a lot, about having to be on faculty in a science department and make your living and prove your worth by getting grants, scientific grants. Well, if your grant was considered scientifically meritorious, meaning you had a good idea and it sounds great, that might have been 30% of the grants. But of those, only like 5% of the total number ever got funded. So you could be smart, you could have a great idea, you could write a great grant. I was a good writer. But every year it felt like this struggle to prove myself, to show that I was valuable. And the way you're valuable is you get grant money. And when you get a lot of grant money, you get promoted, you become, I was an assistant professor, you become a full professor and you keep growing up the ladder. And I was grumbling to a friend of mine that, I want to go somewhere, I said. Now, I was in Atlanta at the time. I want to go somewhere where I can hang a shingle. That felt like a simple life. You hang a shingle. And I want a house next to a barn. I want to be able to walk to the barn. And I want to get a horse. And he looked at me and he said, and this is a guy who never, ever, ever gave me an opinion about what I should do for my life. Never, ever, no matter how many times I grumbled about something. But he looked me dead in the eye and he said, you need to apply to medical school. I was like, what? What is he talking about? And I said, oh, I'll probably flunk. I mean, I've heard those courses are grueling. He looked at me again. And when you reflect back on something and you see the zing in the moment, when I reflect back of how he looked at me, there was a zing. And he said, you should apply to medical school. So here I am at 38 years old, And I applied to medical school to Johns Hopkins. I never dreamed I'd get in. I applied to other places, but I get an interview and I get accepted, and I get accepted in a class that for the first time ever was regulated or dictated that it had to take 50% women. And the dean of admissions, who was a woman who was doing things a new way, picked students who had been in life in other ways. She didn't want the typical pre-med students. She wanted people who had seen the world. So we had writers, we had musicians, we had a Broadway performing artist, we had school teachers, we had somebody who was a science writer. It was phenomenal. I could never have predicted I would be there. So I went to medical school, and luckily, I thought I was going to flunk. I didn't flunk. But I found that academic life didn't fit anymore. So I ended up in York, Pennsylvania, in Amish country. And then I ended up west of there in a very rural town. And I got a house, and the house had a barn. And I could walk to the barn from the house. And for the first time ever, I got a horse and I took riding lessons. And another woo-woo thing is, when I was in my 20s, I had dreamt of having a driveway leading to my house that had dogwood trees. All I could see was dogwoods everywhere in my vision. Well, wouldn't you know, the house I moved to has a long driveway and it has dogwood trees. I would have never predicted that. So move along many years later, and I'm a working physician. I'm in a rural clinic, and I could have never predicted this. And I find out that I'm actually good at it. But what I hadn't known, and what I learned and what I studied for the past 15, maybe more, 15 years, is the role of spirit in everything. Because I started asking myself, why am I healing following numbers? Yes, it's important to get your blood pressure down. It's important to get your blood sugar down. But why am I reducing the healing encounter to numbers? I'm chasing the numbers. I can't stand it. So I started searching for other ways of healing. And you've heard of that in other videos and YouTubes and interviews I've done. So spirit is a big part of my life. In fact, it has made my life full, completely meaningful, and joyful, because I can feel the energies of nature. I can feel the unseen world. And I have conversations. Well, now not out loud because everybody think I'd be crazy. But in my head, I'm having conversations with these energies. And it is meaningful, and it has enriched my life. So now let's move along to the point of this whole episode here. A person whom I love very, very much has struggled for 2 years with a bone marrow cancer. This is horrible. This is horrible. And I watched it last summer. I watched it get worse. I watched her depend on transfusions every week. Now, I hate needles. It would be a lot. I would probably go under if they're putting a needle the size of a straw in my arm to give me a transfusion. Now, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not much. I would be unglued. But she wasn't. And I've talked about her before. She wakes up and paints the canvas of her day in her mind. to make it turn out the way she wants it to. And it does. So here we are moving forward. It's time for bone marrow transplant. Now, you wouldn't wish that on your worst enemy. That is horrific. We go to Johns Hopkins, kind of like, for me, like coming home. I see all the new buildings. I don't remember those when I was a student. Incredible talent, unbelievable staff, highly professional. And they have a new way of doing it where you don't have to stay in a hospital room. You can live off campus if you're within an hour. So we rent an Airbnb. And we take turns, because she has to have someone with her all the time. We take turns spending time down there, taking her to the appointments, being there. Well, I was there for the beginning, and then I didn't come back for 3 weeks. And she's there for 2 months, by the way. Didn't come back for 3 weeks. And in that time, things turned to crap. And she ends up on a ventilator. Now you can imagine my distress, because literally from June till the current time, so this was happening in December and January, I was up every morning at 3 a.m. with anxiety and turning it best as I could into prayers. I have never prayed so much in my entire life. My whole waking thoughts were consumed by asking my helpers to step in, doing whatever I could energetically and spiritually. So here I come back for my shift at the hospital, and she's just gotten off the ventilator. She's been on the ventilator for 11 days. Well, I'm telling you, that is not how it was supposed to go. So, anyway, and she can't swallow. And they've put a tube down her nose to be able to give her food, because all of her medicines otherwise would have to go by IV. And that means they would have to be diluted with fluid, which means it would make her breathing worse. And we just got her off the ventilator. So we don't want all that fluid. So it's essential to have this tube in her nose. Well, they tried and they tried and they tried. And she said, no more. And I could tell she meant it. She was going to quit. Now, this is after you have had 5 days of horrible chemotherapy, a whole day of total body radiation. We're talking scorched earth to knock out every single bit of her immune system and her bone marrow, to knock it out. And then you throw that, now ventilator for 11 days. And now, after losing your hair, losing weight, not being able to swallow, feeling like crap from the chemo and the radiation, and now you can't get the nasogastric tube in. And she says no more. Well, I'm telling you, I went into, wasn't Mama Bear, it was Dragon Fury. And the doctor came in, it was a Saturday, came in, it was the covering doctor. And I said, and I was actually being pretty ballsy, if I do say so myself, and I said, I apologize ahead of time because I'm going to cuss. And I'm going to say some swear words here. But this is a cluster. She has given up. She has said no more. You need to get somebody here that knows what the hell they're doing to put this tube in. Get a surgery resident. Get someone who is good at this. Because if you take this out, she will not let you put it back in. And she is done. And I am telling you that we have to make this happen. Well, he was so gracious. He didn't flinch. he let me mouth off, and he said, if I were sitting where you are, meaning at the side of the bed of someone I love, I would feel exactly the same way. And I thought to myself at that moment, God bless him for understanding my distress. God bless him for hearing my swear words and recognizing that I was doing dragon fury. I was claiming energetically, spiritually, I was pulling my special person back from the edge. I have never worked so hard in my life. I was holding her back, filling her with every speck of life force I could muster, every energetic I could think of, every unseen helper, the nature spirits, the fairies, the dragons, the angels, Mother Mary, Christ consciousness. I was doing whatever I could to hold her back because she was done. And later that evening, the surgery residents came and put the tube in and started feeding, which included nutrition, thank God, because she hadn't had any in 5 days, included getting her medicines in without overloading her circulatory system. And little by little, she crawled back from the edge. So this story, although that to me is a very, powerful story, the story as I reflect on it, and I reflected on it a lot when my brother said to me, he said, you saved her life. Now, I didn't feel that braggadocio. I didn't feel that pride of, oh yeah, I did that. But I said to him, I said, I'm not going to say this in front of the others because other people were there working hard as well. We all took shifts. I said, I have landed in the right place at the right time with the right talents. I could not have stood up to that doctor and claimed a course, a destiny that I wanted for my person without being a doctor. I could not have had the wisdom to send her life force without my spiritual training. I landed as my time, my rotation, at the perfect time in the course of her 8-week treatment. My rotation landed perfectly. So I said to my brother, I had the right stuff at the right time. And I said to myself, thank you, God. So over the past few months, as the PTSD of that whole thing has faded, and my beautiful person is so good and done with the horrors and working her way back to totally, completely free of this illness, I have reflected, how did I end up in that perfect place? How did I get the skills that I needed for what I will argue was a event that was soul directed? And my girlfriend, who is really, really tapped in, she's an energy worker and deeply a Christian mystic, said to me, she said, this was ordained beforehand. And God, Spirit, the universe, did everything to put me in this place. And when I think about how, if we really, really get down to it, there is no time or space. This convolution, this combination of energetics that I gathered, that were given to me, that I was led to, came together for a seriously important moment in my life and the life of a person I love so, so much. So when I think of that, you could say, okay, well, you're a doctor. Of course, you could have seen that and said it. Well, I had the rotation at the exact right time. Well, I did, as a doctor, sort of know that might be a rough time, and I asked for that time. But something told me, take that week. I am old enough now and have been through enough now that I actually have the chutzpah to stand up to a doctor. And I tried to be as polite as possible by saying, I apologize ahead of time, but I'm going to cuss. No one else in my family who could have been there rotating through would have been able to do that. I know that. No one else, and I say this again without ego, no one else had the combination of things that I have gathered over my life to sit there in that hospital room and fill her up with life force. Well, I didn't do it. I asked my helpers to do it. I had the intention, and we've talked a lot about this. Intention is key. And I held that intention with unbelievable discipline. And it's exhausting. You know, if you've really sat and held a thought and an intention, it's exhausting. And it worked. It and everything else that everyone was putting into the pile worked. So when I say to you, have you been guided to the place you are at this moment in your life? Maybe things happened along the way you had no way of predicting. Maybe you stumbled, maybe an opportunity opened, maybe you did enough spiritual work to have an open perspective. So when out in the distance a door opens, you say, well, oh, look, let's walk over there. The open-mindedness, all of those things that come together. And I believe very strongly, and probably you do too, deep inside, you are exactly where you need to be. The lessons that you need to learn, the help that you're going to offer somebody around you because of where you are. Your presence matters, and I believe it was declared long ago, and you ended up exactly where you should be. So no, I never, ever, ever thought I would be a doctor. Never, ever, ever. And here in my life, after, oh gosh, how many years have I been a doctor? 30, a lot, and a scientist before that. Here at this point, I have the tools that I made a difference in the deepest soul deep way possible. And I'm not going to my grave anytime soon. So when I say, and I will go to my grave knowing that this work that I did with the combination of everything that Spirit has led me to and put in front of me and encouraged me to absorb was the most important part of my soul life in this lifetime anyway. And I was led here. So stop and think about your life and look at it. Even if things look rocky, is there something you learned? perhaps if all the rocky path did was turn you away and make you step over somewhere else, where did you land? And wasn't it perfect? Even in its pain, even in its troubles, even in the obstacles and the challenges, isn't it perfect? You've been listening to Maximum Medicine Radio with Doc Martin. Tune in next time while the doc talks health, spirituality, and the impact your beliefs have on every part of who you are, body and soul. Doc Martin unpacks the challenges we face as human beings. To learn more about Doc Martin and Maximum Medicine, visit www.sharonmartinmd.com.